In the 19th century, an expedition from Britain embarked on a busy journey from Southampton to explore the strange and mysterious lands of the north. This is a time of great expeditions, when European nations raced to expand their understanding of uncharted lands around the world. This expedition, consisting of a team of adventurers, scientists, and experienced sailors, embarked on a journey in the hope of discovering the mysteries of the Arctic and the icy lands that no one has ever seen. Their journey begins with a journey across the North Atlantic, where severe weather conditions and intense sea movements are the first challenges they face. The unexpected storms with strong winds and snow rains kept the ship on the island, challenging the courage and skill of the sailors. The dense fog covered, reducing visibility and making navigation difficult. Despite the difficult journey, the expedition was determined to move forward. When the storm finally settled, they realized that they had gone further than they had planned and suddenly saw a vast area of land with ice covering the horizon. This land is Greenland, a frozen territory that few Europeans have ever set foot on and explored. The arrival of Greenland provides a valuable opportunity for the expedition. This is the land they were eager to explore, hoping to learn more about the geography, climate, and life of the natives. The scientists in the team quickly recorded the first observations of the ice-filled terrain, the long flowing glaciers, and the cold waters. While exploring the coast and inland areas of Greenland, the expedition discovered an incredible sight. On a deserted and icy beach, they find a man lying still in the snow. He was wearing native Inuit costumes, including clothes made of seaweed and animal fur. However, as they approached and looked closer, they were surprised to find this man with pale skin and red hair, obviously a European. The question of the identity and purpose of this man quickly arose in the minds of the members of the expedition. How did he wander into this wilderness? And why was he wearing Inuit costumes? This mystery raises a series of questions to be answered and becomes one of the expedition's main targets in the days ahead. The expedition decided to continue its journey of deeper exploration into the interior of Greenland to find out about the strange man and to gather information about the new land. They hope that by going deeper into this icy territory, they can find more clues about the identity and story of the man, as well as discover other mysteries of Greenland. In the days that followed, the expedition went further into Greenland, facing new challenges such as snowstorms, dangerous terrain, and extreme temperatures. Despite this, they persist in the belief that the mysteries of Greenland and the strange man will gradually be uncovered. In a world full of mystery and desire to explore, the question of the first Europeans to set foot in North America is one of the great mysteries of history. We often think of Christopher Columbus, who set foot on the Bahamas coast at the end of the 15th century. But in fact, the story began more than 1,000 years ago, in the 10th century. Those who dare to face this dangerous journey are the Norsemen, or Vikings, from Norway and Denmark. Known for their reputation as invaders and pirates, they were not only brave warriors, but also skilled sailors and settlers. With courage and expeditional skill, the Vikings crossed the ocean and set foot on the icy shores of Greenland, half a millennium before Columbus. Here, they built settlements and farms, import steel, wine, and glass to equip life in this remote land. They raised sheep, cattle, and goats to provide food and raw materials. Not only did the Vikings stop to settle in Greenland, they also made trips to explore the North American continent, into Newfoundland and the Canadian coast. They fought the Native American tribes, bringing back fur, ivory and hardwood extracted from the forests. In Greenland, the Vikings continued to hunt seahorses and even captured polar bears sent back to Norway. In this harsh environment, they grow and survive, showing incredible adaptability. However, after centuries, their civilization in Greenland collapsed and the settlements were deserted, covered under hard and icy soil. The cause of their collapse remains a mystery. The main sources of information about Greenland Norse come from the great epic stories of Iceland. Epic poems and legends of victories of Viking heroes give us insight into their lives. Our story begins with snow-covered slopes and suspect volcanic mouths in Iceland. Iceland was a volcanic island in the northern Atlantic, uninhabited until about 874. From here, the Vikings began their journey to explore new lands, from Iceland to Greenland, and continued to further lands. Eric the Red, or Erik Thorvaldsson, was one of the most famous figures in the history of the Vikings. He was born around 950 in Norway, at a time when Norway had just been unified into a single nation. Norway is known for its rough, cliffy coastline and is divided by narrow bays with many forested trees. Besides, there are small bays in the Great Mountains and rocky islands off the sea. However, Erik was born in southern Norway, where the land was flat, with the sea always stretching out before his eyes, creating an inviting horizon. When he was a boy, Erik might have seen ships sail and watched them disappear from the horizon. These images must have aroused in you the curiosity of the distant lands beyond the point of disappearance that fills you. Your great adventure begins when your father, Thorvald, who has a hot temper, kills a man in a quarrel. This threatens the safety of the Erik family because in the Viking culture, the victim's family can avenge by taking the murderer's life. So, afraid of revenge, the Erik family crossed the sea to the new Norwegian settlement in Iceland, a frozen land that is thought to have smoke coming up from the ground. During that journey, Erik must have seen the sea spread out grey, gloomy and frightening, but also interesting to the boy. This is the adventure I've always dreamed of. In the second half of the 10th century, Iceland was settled by Norway. The Norwegians brought a large number of slaves from Ireland and Scotland to help them live in their new colonies. Animals such as horses, cattle and rabbits were also brought to Iceland for agricultural and livestock development. The people here eat snowfish from the sea, drying on the wood before the wind and cold, an important source of food for their lives. The success of the settlement also meant that most of the best lands were taken. When Erik and his family arrived in Iceland, they only had a choice of an uninhabited land in the Northwestern Territory. Despite the hardship, this is all they have, and Thorvald and his family have stabilized their lives and started working on their farm. During his young years in Iceland, Erik may have heard the stories that the sailors told when they crossed the land. Viking sailors often sail over oceans without a compass, relying on the sun, the moon, the stars and natural signs such as the path of seabirds and whales to find their way. Even though they're old-fashioned sailors, a strong storm can drag them away and get them astray. The stories that Erik heard might include diverted sailors and seeing strange things from afar. The stories of the mysterious islands they saw flowing out of the sea in the fog. The distant lands observed in the ocean. The stories of the blue coast in the west also gradually spread among the northern seafarers, adding to Erik's curiosity and desire for exploration. These stories, however, laid the foundation for Eric the Red's later expeditions to the west. It was the passion for adventure and the desire to explore new lands that led Eric on his adventures, becoming one of the most important explorers in the history of the Vikings. After Eric's father, Thorvald, died, Eric the Red continued to live on his family's farm in Iceland and began his own marriage. However, from the beginning, Eric showed pride and toughness, inherited from his father. Your life is unavoidable from challenges and difficulties. An incident occurred when Eric's workers caused a landslide, leading to the collapse of the farm of an unpleasant neighbor called Eyjolf the Foul. Eyjolf, who has an unpleasant character like his name, is extremely angry and decides to kill Eric's workers in retaliation for the damage caused. This has created a serious conflict between Eric and Eyjolf. Eric, not accepting Eyjolf's actions, pursued and confronted him. The fight between you two was tense and fierce, and eventually Eric won and killed Eyjolf. However, after the heat of the battle settled, Eric realized the serious consequences of his actions. In medieval Norse society, one death can lead to a cycle of violence and revenge that lasts for generations. Eric, worried about starting a fleshly enmity, faces the consequences of his actions. Although the Fowl family did not directly avenge, the Icelandic lords decided to expel Eric the Red from Iceland for 3 years for murder. The deportation forced Eric to leave his hometown. This marks a major turning point in his life, and he faces a difficult situation. Eric realizes he can't stay in Iceland because the enmity of the relatives of the man his father killed in Norway is still there. Eric leaves his hometown and embarks on a new, challenging journey. Feelings of adventure and curiosity about new lands may have motivated him to continue his journey. Despite the difficult situation, Eric remained steadfast and continued his journey, marking a new chapter in his story. Eric the Red, who had to leave his hometown in Iceland due to an accident with his neighbours and was expelled, sought to embark on a new journey of discovery. During his hiding time, he assembled a boat and a crew for an adventurous journey. The stories of the islands in the fog and the broken blue coast from previous sailors have come back to you, blowing up your desire to find the mythical land beyond the ocean. In 982, Eric the Red sailed again, at the age of about 30, with the sole goal of exploring this new land. Your journey will forever change the map of the world. The land you're targeting is Greenland, the largest island in the world not considered a continent. Here, more than 80% of the land is covered by the Greenland ice strip, 3 kilometers thick and just behind Antarctica. Although Eric could not know about the geographical structure of the new land at the time, this is where he set foot at the end of the 10th century. Overcoming an almost 500-kilometer challenging journey, Eric faces dangerous glaciers and Atlantic hurricanes. However, in spite of all the dangers, Eric walked around the southern coast of Greenland at the end of that year and sailed to the west coast to find a place to land. During his journey, Eric and his crew found a safe little bay, less covered by ice. As they sailed into the bay, a bright green landscape appeared in front of them, with falling leaf trees, brown trees, and pine trees rising from the steep ribs, and low bushes like dwarf whites covering both sides of the valley. For Eric and the northerners of that time, this landscape has the potential to develop, promising a bright future. The scenery here is still harsh, similar to the trees in the mountains of Norway, where life almost stops developing. However, for the northerners of that time, this small strip of land was still a promising place to settle and grow in the future. Despite the climate and environmental challenges, Eric the Red has succeeded in finding this new land, opening a new agenda in the Nordic exploration journey. Eric spends the next 3 years of his life in exile, exploring the new lands he has found. He explored along the coast, carefully recording the terrain, the natural conditions, and the habitable lands. He observed and documented the beaches, the small bays, and the green lands, making a clear distinction between areas with settlement potential and places that are harsh and uninhabitable. At the end of his expulsion, Eric returned to Iceland with a specific plan in mind. You want to gather a group of settlers, including those who are willing to venture and explore, to return to new lands and permanent settlements. However, you know it won't be easy to persuade people to leave their familiar lands to go to a strange land. To make the new land more attractive, Eric named it Greenland, a name that evokes the image of a green, promising land. In this way, I hope to attract more settlers. This name, though somewhat misleading about the real condition of the land, proved Eric's persuasive and sales talent. In the summer, Eric sails again, but this time he's not alone. He led a fleet of 25 ships, carrying men, women, and children, along with supplies, building materials, wood, nails, and livestock like cattle, chickens, and rabbits. This is an incredible sight, with colourful sails and sharp dragon heads crawling through the waves of the sea. However, this journey is not easy. Of the 25 ships departing, only 14 reached Greenland. 11 were missing at sea. The survivors face new challenges in establishing a colony in Greenland. Colonizing Greenland is as difficult as establishing a colony on the moon today. Medieval Vikings faced a long and hard journey through the icy waters of the Arctic. The Gokstad in the Oslo Museum is an example of the type of ship that the Vikings used. When you see this ship, you will be impressed by its thin, organic shape, testifying to the great skill of shipbuilders. But this ship is also small and vulnerable to storms and waves. The Vikings on board suffered harsh conditions during the weekly journey. The high waves struck the small ship, making it a miracle to survive these journeys. Travelling from Iceland to Greenland is much more dangerous than from Norway to Iceland. One of the main reasons is the presence of floating ice. Greenland lies on a strong ocean stream that flows down from the Arctic Ocean, carrying huge ice blocks carved from glaciers and mountains of floating ice. This stream runs along the eastern coast of Greenland and then returns to the western coast, surrounding the island in a dangerous arc of glacier. Today, this flow is still causing many difficulties to the modern shipping industry, as it was in the 10th century. The waters around Greenland are known to be one of the most dangerous waters in the world. With ice conditions and the appearance of large glaciers, navigating through this area is a big challenge for any sailor. There are many stories of people who risked or lost their lives trying to cross these harsh waters. One of the famous stories is about Lodin, an Icelandic whose nickname is Lik Lodin, or Lodin's corpse. Lodin makes a living by exploring the eastern coast of Greenland, where he collects the bodies of Icelandic men who have been sunk in this dangerous waters. Lodin brought the bodies he found in the caves and on the rocks back home. Often near the dead, Lodin discovered rune characters engraved to record the unfortunate events and suffering these people had experienced. Though Greenland's waters are dangerous, northern sailors have the skills to navigate through the ice. Their courage and craftsmanship helped many people to succeed in crossing dangerous waters. However, even with their skill, they face many dangers, including unexpected storms and the slip of the ice. In these circumstances, the importance of spirituality and faith is undeniable. A surviving document showed the prayer of a Greenlander before the dangerous voyage. Prayer shows reliance on faith and spiritual strength to face the dangers of the journey. Seafarers have prayed for the safety and desire of God to protect them on their journey, testifying to the important role of spirituality in their lives and work. The Greenland Sea, with its dangers and challenges, is a part of the difficult life that northern sailors face. However, with courage, skill and faith, they overcame these difficulties to explore and settle in new lands. But despite these huge obstacles, Eric and his 14 surviving settlement boats succeeded. Eric the Red and his settlement fleet succeeded in crossing the dangerous waters of Greenland and establishing settlements at the southern tip of the island. Of the original 25 ships, only 14 reached Greenland. The rest were missing at sea. When they arrived, Eric and the settlers built a settlement in a place called the Intrepid, or Eastern Settlement. This area became Eric's home, and where they began to grow and breed. Later, the Norwegians sailed to the western coast of Greenland and established a second settlement known as Vestribygd, or Western Settlement. Both settlements have become the first spots for the development of the Norse community in Greenland. However, life in Greenland is not easy. The harsh Arctic climate, with summer temperatures not exceeding 10 degrees Celsius and winter temperatures falling to -50 degrees Celsius, causes many difficulties for cultivation and survival. In summer, there is continuous daylight called the midnight sun, while in winter, daylight is very little, lasting only 3-4 hours. Nevertheless, the Norwegians have adapted to difficult farming conditions by fertilizing and refining the soil around their farms. Soil studies have shown that soil thickness has increased significantly after the Norwegians arrived and established their farms. Bone samples from settlements show that the Nordic raised cattle, including cows, to supply milk and dairy products such as cheese, milk, and yogurt. However, the development of settlers in Greenland is not based solely on agriculture. They found an abundant supply of marshmallows, a very valuable resource at the time. An adult male marshmallow has a thigh of more than a metre and weighs up to 5.5 kilograms each. This ivory was used to make works of art and artefacts, including the famous Lewis chess engraved in Scotland in the 12th century. Northerners also hunt cranes, salmon, whales, and monkeys, animals with long horns from the head. They sold the horns of the unicorn to Europeans, who believed it was the horn of the true unicorn, creating great demand throughout medieval Europe. This economic development has attracted more people to Greenland, and there may have been more than 5,000 residents scattered across the coast of Greenland. The Eastern Settlement, the closest to Europe, is where more people are concentrated, and there is a better connection between the two places. In the Eastern Settlement, the Norwegians built a Christian church decorated with sandstone extracted from the hills of Greenland. The cathedral was completed with coloured glass and heavy bronze bells from Europe, showing the cultural and commercial bonds of the settlers with their homeland. The land of Greenland has become a difficult and challenging habitation for the Vikings since their first settlement. Stories of the impressive sight of the polar with blue, green and purple lights dancing in the sky have become a symbol of this land. The polarity is the result of the interaction between electrically charged particle currents from the solar flames and the Earth's atmosphere, occurring at an altitude of about 100 kilometers above the top. In the area of Garda, the remains of a large warehouse were found, built like a cathedral. The doors are made of massive, solid blocks of stone, giving images of the Stonehenge pillars. This is a shelter for precious Viking animals, which can reach hundreds of cows, helping them to avoid the harsh winters of wind and snow. The Viking chronicles record that in the spring, they usually have to take the cattle out of the cage because the legs of this animal become weak due to inactivity during the long, dark winter months. However, the lives of the people of Greenland have never been entirely self-sufficient. The shortage of wood, steel and other building materials has made it difficult to build ships and other works. A good example is the story of Asmund Kastanrassi, a Greenlander who built his own ship in Greenland in 1189. This is a significant achievement in conditions of material shortage. Kastanrassi's ship is held by wooden sockets and ropes made of seaweed. Kastanrassi successfully brought his ship back to Iceland, impressing the locals. Icelanders on the coast gathered around to look at Kastanrassi's unique ship. However, Kastanrassi's creativity can only take him far to a certain extent. During the next stretch of the journey to Norway, the tracks and logs were loosened, causing the ship to collapse, and Kastanrassi and his ship to sink in the North Sea. This incident shows how difficult the lives of the people of Greenland would be if their ties with Europe were cut off. The harsh weather conditions in Greenland are not the only rivals the people of Greenland face. When the Vikings first came to this new land, they began to find clues that they weren't the first to step there. In fact, they discovered the ruins of the former residents on both the east and the west of Greenland. The pieces of leather, the boats, and the stones that were crafted showed that there was a people there that the people of Greenland called Skraelings, a word in ancient Norse that means barbarian in modern Icelandic. In the medieval Norse language, the Vikings in Greenland used this word to describe all the different tribes and ethnic groups they encountered in the process of exploring the New World. Native Americans are often regarded as half-mythical and inferior creatures in Viking folk culture, turning into witches, dwarves, and demons. The first Norse to meet in Greenland was called the Dorset, a people who lived here more than 2,000 years ago. However, the contact between them and the Vikings was temporary. The Dorset people were later replaced by a people called Thule, the ancestors of the modern Inuit. At this point, the Thules are spreading their influence across Canada, Alaska, and Greenland. On the vast land of Greenland, the Thule and the Norse took a long time to get into contact. However, at least by the end of the 12th century, the Inuit and the Vikings faced each other. An explorer named Thorfinn Karlsefni wrote about these peoples, describing them as people of low height, with scary facial expressions and confused hair. Their eyes are big and their cheeks wide, and they often use kayak boats to travel. Both the Norse and the Inuit have stories of their encounters. In Inuit folk stories, the Vikings are often referred to as enemies, and the encounters between the two cultures are often violent. For example, in an ancient Inuit story, a kayak man from Arpat arrived and encountered a Norse collecting shells on the beach. The Norse asked the boatman to throw his trees at him, and the kayak man eventually threw and killed the Norse. The Inuit feared that the Nordic would avenge the death of their fellow citizens, leading to a cycle of revenge and war between the two cultures. The Nordic document also notes that wars between the two cultures have taken place. and the Inuit often regard the Nordic as mysterious and somewhat ridiculous creatures, not suitable for harsh environments. Inuit stories tell about the Nordic people walking on the ice, but the thin and penetrating ice drowned them. Some nights, it was said to be possible to see images of the Nordic under the ice, and this was seen as a sign of someone dying. The Thule began to move south, approaching the Viking settlements in Greenland in the 14th century. They occupy some of the same narrow gulf areas, though in different parts of the country. Although the common image of Inuit may be friendly and humble, reality shows that they have strong self-defense when challenged. The Inuit regularly defended their southern border from other Native American tribes, like the Cree. The Inuits' weapons and armour included armour made of hard horseback leather and tendons, bone torch, and knife with a stone tongue. They also have a strong bow thanks to increasing their traction strength by using dry thighs. These characteristics make the Inuit a serious threat to the northern settlements. For example, Viking chronicles record that in 1379, the Thulians attacked the eastern Viking settlements, killing 18 men and capturing 2 boys and a woman. This is one example of how conflict between these two cultures often leads to violence. Nevertheless, the relationship between the Inuit and the Viking is not just conflicting. Both cultures have established rich traditions of trade in the process of interaction. Objects such as scraps, pieces of iron, cooking utensils, bars, ships, shipping nails, carpenter's planes, and oak shipwrecks have been found in Inuit sites, far beyond the scope of traditional Nordic colonies. A small ivory statue, which seems to represent Europeans, was discovered in the ruins of an Inuit house. This shows the cultural exchange between the two groups. There was also a language exchange, with some modern Inuit words originating from the Vikings, borrowed from their northern neighbours 1,000 years ago. This demonstrates the cultural influence of the Norse on the Inuit and vice versa. Though there are times of peace between the two cultures, conflict often occurs, and this relationship often leads to tension. The inability to establish a lasting peace between the two groups of people has made life more difficult for the Vikings in Greenland, especially as their fortunes get worse. The Vikings in Greenland also faced challenges ranging from harsh weather conditions to resource shortages. In struggling with difficult living conditions and threats from the Inuit, the Vikings have had difficulty in their survival in the land. Leif Erikson, a famous Viking explorer, made an important journey to the North American continent 5 centuries before Christopher Columbus was born. His journey is recorded in Icelandic legends and historical documents, suggest that he was one of the first Norwegians to discover America. Leif Erikson was the son of Eric the Red, a famous Viking leader and the first to settle in Greenland. Leif inherited his father's spirit of adventure and appeared as a talented young explorer. In 999, at the age of 20, Leif returned to Norway and served under King Olaf I. Olaf was the first king of Norway to convert to Christianity and directed Leif Erikson to convert. On a mission from King Olaf, Leif returned to his hometown of Greenland and converted the local people to Christianity. On his way home, Leif was blown off his usual route and set foot on a strange land he had never seen before. This land has new things like grapes, wild wheat fields, and even butter. He also found 2 Norwegians sunk in the area and rescued them onto his ship. On his return to Greenland, Leif decided to organize an expedition to explore this new land. He gathered a group of people and returned to the new land in the hope of learning more about it. They land in the land of the Helluland, the Markland, and finally Vinland, where the climate is mild and the supply of salmon is abundant. Leif and his men spent the winter on the coast of North America, in a small settlement called Leifsbudir. This area may be located in today's coastal area, known as Canada, where you can still find fruits, especially wild-growing fog grapes. After the winter, they returned to Greenland with items like wood and grapes from Vinland. The stories of the journey and life's discoveries have encouraged many other Norwegians to take the same journey. The discovery of Leif Erikson and his crew opened a new chapter in Viking history, with their exploration and interaction with the North American continent. Not to be disappointed, Leif Erikson's brother Thorvald made a journey of his own, which became a prominent story in the history of North America discovery. In 1004, Thorvald embarked on a bold journey with the aim of further exploring the North American continent, continuing the journey of his brother, Leif Erikson. However, Thorvald's journey did not go as smoothly as Leif's, and he faced more risks and tragedies. When Thorvald arrived to destroy Leif's wilderness in Vinland, a land believed to be in the present-day Newfoundland, Canada, he spent the winter there without any incidents. This gives you and your crew time to plan your next trip in the spring. In the spring, Thorvald and his crew sailed south and encountered a strange sight. 9 Native Americans sleeping under 3 leather-covered canoes on a beach. Native Americans, whom the Nordic call the Skraelings, were attacked by Thorvald. He killed 8 of them, but 1 man escaped and ran through the coastal forest. After Thorvald's initial attack, his team celebrated victory and camped on the beach. However, their joy didn't last long. The escaped Native Americans returned with support, and they attacked Thorvald's convoy with arrows fired out of the woods. During the chaos and attempt to retreat toward the boat, Thorvald was hit by an arrow and died. Thorvald's last words were said to be, "What a stupid joke. We've found a land that's rich in resources but barely enjoys any of them." Thorvald's death marked a turning point in the crew's journey, leading them to retreat along the coast without a leader. Lack of leadership leads to internal football and squad quarrels, making it harder for them to return to Greenland. Thorvald's and his crew's failed journey reveals the great challenge of the Vinland natives, who are ready to defend their lands from outside intruders. The indigenous American reaction to the advent of the Vikings may have contributed to stopping America's prosperity for the next 500 years. The Norwegians were unable to establish a long-term settlement in North America because of their tense relations with Native Americans. Instead, they only set up a few temporary camps in Canada and often returned to Greenland after every winter. At Lanceau Meadow in Newfoundland, Canada, an old Viking camp was discovered in 1960. This is the only confirmed location of Norse presence in North America. George Decker, a local resident, led the archaeologists to what he called the Old Indian Camp. However, when excavated, archaeologists realized that the structure and architecture here did not fit any of the Native American architectural styles. Instead, it resembles Viking buildings in Iceland and Greenland. The discoveries at Lanceau Meadow include rough stone walls covered with grass to keep warm, and 8 buildings that can accommodate up to 150 people. The Viking artifacts found at the site included a stone oil lamp, a grinding stone, a copper socket, a bone needle, and part of a spinning axle. However, this seems to be only a temporary settlement, as there are no signs of burial or agriculture, as well as animal shelters. Lanceau Meadow is used as a repair station, with a mill and iron furnace found on site. This suggests that this area was used as a stop to repair damaged boats. The Vikings made frequent trips to North America to collect wood, build ships, and possibly collect foxes, bears, and bears. However, the lack of resources to establish long-term settlements in the United States due to weak links with Europe only supports a temporary base. The survival of the settlements in Greenland also faced difficulties. The western settlement of Greenland, which is farther and farther away from Europe, is the first to fall. Ivar Bardason sailed to Greenland in 1341 to find out why the taxation of the western settlements was delayed. Bardason found no signs of settlers, only cattle and wild sheep running free. Climate and its impact play a major role in influencing Viking survival in North America. The period from 900 to 1300 is known as the Warm Medieval period, when sea ice drops in the northern Atlantic, making sailing from Scandinavia to Greenland less dangerous. Longer summers keep livestock, sheep and goats, on pastures along the narrow bays of Greenland. The prolonged growing season also allows the cultivation of European crops in this northern region. During the warmer Middle Ages, which lasted from around 900 to 1300, the global climate became warmer. This facilitates northern settlement in Greenland, an area of remote and harsh geography. Northerners have taken advantage of warmer weather and improved cultivation capabilities to build settlements in Greenland. This period is marked by longer summers and less sea ice, making sailing from Scandinavia to Greenland safer. But this stability doesn't last forever. The Small Ice Age began in the late 13th century, when summer temperatures around the world fell sharply. Many reasons have been given to explain this climate change, including a decrease in solar radiation, changes in Earth's orbit, and an increase in volcanic activity around the world. The massive volcanic eruption on the Indonesian island of Lombok in 1257 was one of the strongest eruptions in the last 7,000 years, reducing the penetration of global sunlight. In addition, the Black Death epidemic has caused severe damage to the world's population, reducing the population by up to 60% in some regions and affecting the global climate. As the temperature drops, the Norse in Greenland faces an increasingly harsh environment. The radiocarbon chronology of plant material in Iceland suggests that the colder summers began around 1275 to 1300. This leads to the expansion of the sea ice, making it difficult to trade and connect with Europe. Northern settlements in Greenland were built on the edge of the habitable Earth, only 300 kilometers from the Arctic Circle. This means the sun doesn't show up in winter, and the temperature drops sharply in summer. The sea ice blocked the narrow bays and prevented ships from landing, while the ice made growing and grazing difficult. In the face of climate change, the Norse in Greenland had a choice between continuing to live the traditional European style or adapting to the Inuit lifestyle. Archaeologists have found evidence that Northerners stick to the European way of life even when conditions get harder. They maintain European-style outfits and woolen clothes and keep up with fashion trends. Although the Norse continued to live in the traditional style, they had difficulty adapting to the harsh environment of Greenland. These people refused to learn from the Inuit about hunting and fishing on the ice. This denial has limited their ability to survive in harsh environments. As far as the environment is concerned, the Nordic people have used traditional farming methods that are not suitable for the thin soil and short season of grazing in Greenland. They cut down trees and vegetation to make lawns for livestock, burned wood instead of seaweed for heating and cooking. This leads to deforestation and leaves the land affected by strong winds. As the environmental conditions deteriorate, the settlements of the Nordic people are covered with sand and plains. For example, in Vatnavirfi, the remains of a northern house were found buried in a 10 feet deep sand. However, new evidence suggests that the Norse people have adapted to changing environments by hunting cranes, an activity that the Inuit also do. The number of cranes in the trash has increased significantly, indicating that the Norse people have shifted to seafood. Food from the sea accounted for up to 80% of the meal in the late settlement period. Norwegians also tried to manage resources carefully. They restricted the hunting of harbour cranes, even though they are easy to hunt, to avoid extinction. Instead, they're focusing on more abundant cranes. However, this adaptation is not enough to stop malnutrition and population decline. Studies of human skeletons show that the Norse people are beginning to suffer from severe malnutrition. The skeletons from the late settlement period show signs of slow growth and tooth wear. The Vikings in Greenland went through a period of decline in the 14th and 15th centuries, leading to the collapse of settlements in the region. The main causes of this collapse include the decline in ties with Europe, the influence of the plague, and the difficulties in survival. The relationship between Greenland and Europe became more tense in the 14th century. In 1349, a ship from Britain brought plague, Black Death, to Norway, causing devastation to the Norwegian population and seriously affected the economy. The plague has killed a large number of people, estimated to be around 40 to 50% of Norway's population, and has a bad impact on every major industry. Although the plague did not reach Greenland directly, its impact on supply from Norway was serious. Supply journeys from Bergen to Iceland and Greenland have been significantly slowed down. The last bishop of Greenland died around 1378, and no new bishops were sent from Norway to replace him. The situation got worse in 1393, when a group of German pirates, known as the Food Brothers, attacked the city of Bergen. The attack caused major damage to the port, resulting in a major disruption to the links between Greenland and Europe. Grain imports from Norway to Greenland have almost stopped, exacerbating the shortage of food and resources. The Norse in Greenland has to hunt more cranes and horses to get their food. Sometimes they have to travel up to 1,500 kilometers to find food. Long and difficult hunting trips, requiring every man in the settlements to participate. The climate is getting harsher, the ice is spreading, and the storms on the sea are increasing. Lack of supplies and difficulties in survival are increasingly challenging for the Vikings in Greenland. An example of a catastrophic hazard is a terrible storm in the Shetland Islands on July 16, 1832. The storm sank 16 ships and killed more than 100 men. Similarly, such a disaster could have happened to the Norse in Greenland when they had to travel far to find food in harsh weather conditions. The 15th century marked the end of the Nordic presence in Greenland. The last record of the Vikings in Greenland records a marriage in 1408 at Hervelsay Church. This is part of the remaining eastern settlement. The remains of the Hervelsay Church remain to this day, a crude construction of granite ruined on the grassy edge of the narrow bay. In 1408, a remarkable event took place in Greenland, the wedding of Thorstein Olafsson and Sigrid Bjornsdottir. The flames burn and the sea snails scream to celebrate this great event. After the wedding, the couple will leave Greenland, return to Iceland, Thorstein's home country. This event marks a turning point in the history of the Vikings in Greenland. By 1435, less than 3 decades after the marriage of Thorstein and Sigrid, archaeological evidence suggested that all the Vikings in Greenland had disappeared. Their disappearance appears to be linked to the decline in the value of the marshmallow, the most valuable commodity exported from Greenland. The Northern Era is about to end, and Portugal and other Mediterranean nations are beginning to open their trade routes with sub-Saharan Africa. This resulted in high-quality ivory penetrating the European market, directly competing with Viking ivory. The deteriorating climate, with the koinfitokenshin wallaries of the cold winters becoming more prevalent, has led some Vikings in Greenland to decide to leave. This is evident when we analyse archaeological evidence. Most of the human remains found are of older people, while the younger generation has migrated elsewhere. The historical records do not mention any form of migration or mass evacuation from Greenland, but this may have happened silently. In other locations around Greenland, the situation is worse. Studies indicate that debris has been found in the colonies in the habitat of some of the northern ruins, suggesting that the bedrooms and living areas used to be home to dead bodies. This shows the despair of the Viking community when there's no one around to bury the dead. Another proof of the decline is the killing and eating of Norwegian horns and newborn calves. The skeletons of these animals were found with traces of knife, suggesting they had been killed and eaten. This is a sign that the Vikings in Greenland have been facing severe food shortages, forcing them to eat animals that they did not previously regard as food. These days are zero and point to is pessimistic theory. As the climate gets worse and ships from Europe stop arriving, all the Vikings in Greenland may have died of starvation and mortality in their home venues. Their disappearance may have happened tragically due to their inability to adapt to environmental changes and harsh living conditions. However, there is another theory worth considering. The Vikings in Greenland may have left elsewhere instead of starving and dying. Due to the lack of specific information about their final fate, this possibility cannot be ruled out. The Vikings in Greenland may have migrated to other lands, looking for shelter and new opportunities. In 1723, Norwegian explorer Hans Egede set foot on Greenland in search of surviving Norwegians. Egede brought with him hope and passion to learn about the fate of the Vikings who lived in this land. However, he only saw the ruins and ruins of abandoned settlements. When Egede met the Inuit in Greenland, he tried to gather information about the Vikings here. The Inuit showed him the ruins of a stone church where the settlers of Greenland used to worship. When Egede asked the Inuit who destroyed the church, they answered that the Norwegians did it when they left the country. One of the theories is that the Norwegians left orderly and planned. They took all their valuables and closed the back door, indicating they were ready to emigrate. However, their destination remains a mystery. The possibility that the Vikings had migrated to Vinland, now known as Canada, is a popular theory. Vinland is closer to Greenland than Norway or Iceland, so it's a viable journey for the Vikings. The pressure of severe weather conditions and pirate activity may have driven this decision. Some historical evidence supports this theory of migration. Bishop Odson's 17th century chronicles refer to settlers in Greenland losing their Christian faith and turning to the American people. This suggests that the Vikings may have reached the coast of North America. In 1347, a ship arrived on the coast of Iceland after being blown up in a storm. The crew on board declared that they were on their way to Vinland. This could be one of those ships that's filled with Norwegians trying to start a new life on the coast of North America. The question is, what happened to these settlers? Will they encounter a violent outcome, or learn to adapt to the new environment and make friends with the natives? Will they adopt new customs and lifestyles to survive? So far, no specific archaeological evidence has been found to support this theory. However, there are some suggestions about the possibility that the Vikings have integrated into the New World. The story of a Norseman discovered wearing Inuit marshmallows may indicate that they have learned to live in a new environment. Finally, the passage ends with Voluspa, an ancient Norse poetry dating back to pre-Christianity in Norway. The poem tells the end of the world, called Ragnarok, when the world collapsed. This symbolizes the feeling of living at the end of the world, surrounded by sea and ice. The story of the fate of the Vikings in Greenland remains an unresolved historical mystery. Until there's clearer archaeological evidence, we can just go on speculating about their fate and the journey they've made. What do you think of Viking Greenland? Is Greenland green as its name suggests? Leave your comments in the comments section, and don't forget to press the sign up button to continue your journey to ancient history with us. Thank you for paying attention. Have a good day.